Hello, welcome to or welcome back to my channel. My name is Christine. I like to read dark and disturbing things, and today we are doing my July reading wrap up. So let's check it out. So for the month of July, I read 11 books, and it looks like, let me count. 6 books are books that I previously owned before the beginning of the year. I have been keeping track about what I have been reading as far as when I purchased it to make it feel like I'm doing the Read What You Won't challenge, basically. I've already uploaded my first half of July, so I'm going to leave a link to that down below where I talk about the books that I read in the first 2 weeks of the month, and now we're going to be talking about what I read in the last 2 weeks of the month. My favorite book from the first 2 weeks was Camp Damascus from Chuck Tingle, and then we'll see what ended up being my favorite read overall for the entire month. So I started talking about this in my last video because I read My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. That is the first book in the Indian Lake Trilogy, and that was a reread for me. That was a 5-star reread, and I was preparing to get to the last book in the series, The Angel of Indian Lake. But first, I had to reread Don't Fear the Reaper, which was the second book in the series. So this one for me, the first time I read it, and I will say that I felt the same way the second time around, was that it was a 4.5-star read. I really enjoyed it, but it didn't have that same spark. Just a little bit of spark was missing for me from this one from My Heart is a Chainsaw. And I think it's because that in My Heart is a Chainsaw, we are only in the mind of Jade Daniels, which is the character that I fell in love with and a main reason why I really love this series. I just really identified with her. I fell in love with her character. And then when we get to the second book in the series, I won't spoil anything, so there's not a whole lot I can talk about, but we are getting it from different points of view, not just from Jade Daniels. This, though, has some amazing horror scenes in it, some pretty gruesome kills, and it is a fun time overall. So 4.5-star is almost a 5-star. I mean, it is just shy of perfect in my eyes, and I still enjoy this. So my reason for rereading them is because the first time I had read this, the other thing that I thought the first time I read this was that I maybe did not remember some of the characters that were brought back up in this book. And upon reread, I did understand it a little bit better. However, I think that there's just some characters that weren't super important in the first book that have more importance in the second book. So the parts where I felt like I was kind of confused the first time reading it, I realized it didn't really matter. And I went fresh into the third book of the series. Now, I was a little hard pressed to get this done because I was going to an author event where Stephen Graham Jones was going to be speaking, and I really wanted to finish the Indian Lake Trilogy. I had been putting this off for months. Of course, I had to pre-order it, got it right when it came out, but I've been putting it off for reasons. One is I was a little bit scared as to how this trilogy was going to end, and then I was just also scared that it was ending at all because I really just wanted it to live on forever. And I tend to do this with books that I really highly anticipate. I get them right away and then I just hoard them because I want the experience to last longer, which I know is weird, but I'm weird. So The Angel of Indian Lake, what did I think about this? I have some complicated feelings about this one. Again, I can't say too much about it because I can't go into detail without spoiling the first 2 books. But I did recently watch Violet Prin's video. I will link that down below as well, because I think she did a really good job explaining why she didn't enjoy this book so much, or her thoughts on this book. And I think that a lot of her thoughts are very similar to mine, but I have like this coating of nostalgic love for this character from the past 2 books. And I think that kind of softened the blow for me a little bit. So first of all, I will say that we're back in the mind of Jade Daniels, and she is, what can I say? What can I even say? She is a changed person after the first two, not only because of the events that happened in the first two books, but the repercussions of those events. And that is something that I found interesting with this book when I first read it, was that whenever we read a story and, you know, our hero comes out on top, I don't often think about what happens to our hero after that. What is the aftermath? You always assume, or maybe I shouldn't say you, I always assume that things end up okay because this person saved lives. So, of course, whatever destruction happens or whatever chaos happens during the event, it's all just going to be like brushed under the rug because obviously the good outweighed the evil. Like, this person may have caused some damage. Like, no one's putting Superman in jail because he saved lives but destroyed some buildings along the way. And that was not the case for Jade Daniels. And so it was interesting to read about the repercussions of what happened, even if it wasn't 100% fair. So Jade Daniels is a changed person, not only because of the events that she's gone through, but her having to deal with the aftermath of those events. And then also she's like physically changed as well. Like, she's in rough shape. She's missing some toes from frostbite. I think she can't close her hand all the way. Like, she's got some physical ailments now because of basically fighting for her life in the first two books. So she's back and she has a new position in town. And I can't really say too much more than that. Other than I felt like she read a lot older than she was. Like, I think she's supposed to be like 24 in this book. And I felt like I was reading about maybe someone my age or even older at times. And I understand that these things probably aged her, and being in the places she's been has aged her, but it just, something about her just didn't feel 100% right to me. The other thing that I felt like was going on with this was I felt like it really dragged the first probably 2/3 of this book. I was just waiting and waiting and waiting for something to happen, and we're missing a main character from the trilogy until about page 300, I believe. And this book is less than 450 pages. So we don't get that main character until the last 150 pages. And I kept thinking, well, there must be a reason for it. Like, there's got to be some big reveal as to why this person isn't in the book. And there just really wasn't. I don't know if that was just for us to spend time with Jade and some other characters and not just this main character, but it felt very off to me and I didn't really understand it. I felt like the book was waiting to start until that person got there, and I was a little bit bored. And then once the chaos hits, I felt like there was just so much chaos that it didn't 100% make sense. Or maybe I need to reread it, but I didn't feel like things were just flying. And I know that's what I liked about the first book, is that there was tons of chaos. There was a lot of character build and story build and then chaos, but it made sense to me. And then the second book was a lot of action. And then this one, it kind of seemed like it wanted to go back to the first book, but it didn't quite work for me. So there was just a lot of chaos. There were many things going on, like too many things going on, too many villains popping out of the woodwork, quite literally, and they did not make sense. And I felt like it was just too much going on. And I don't know, I don't think it worked. I honestly felt like Stephen Graham Jones's heart was not in this book like it was in the first two. And when I went to see him speak, he did mention that he had like a deadline for this book. And when he found out he was able to get like an extension for 6 weeks, he decided to write I Was a Teenage Slasher instead. Like, he had that story that had to come out first. And I feel like you could tell that his heart was in that book and his heart was not in this one. He also said something about feeling the pressure having this be a trilogy with such a beloved character, that he was scared to do anything to Jade as a character because he knew everyone would be really upset. And we would have, like, we 100% would have. But he could have made it work if, as like a self-sacrifice or something. I don't know. I don't want to talk about what could have been, but he said that he didn't want to upset the readers, but also it's a horror book. So what do you expect? Like, it's got to have horror. There's got to be some loss. And there are some definite difficult losses in this book, as there are in all of them. But all I could say is I felt like his heart wasn't 100% in this one. I thought the first book was perfect as is. I was a little surprised to find out that it was going to be a series, but I did still really like this one. And I think that in my mind, I will probably pretend that this one did not happen. I hate to say that because I do still really love Stephen Graham Jones. I really love this series, but I just didn't get anything. I don't know. I don't want to be too negative because I do still love Jade as a character and I love the series. But there was a lot that I didn't understand, and I can't really go into it without spoilers, but I felt like those things weren't really cleared up. It created more questions than it answered for me, and just too much going on. I felt like maybe it was rushed and maybe not given the care and attention that the other two were. So I finished this book a few weeks ago and I still struggle on what I want to rate it. I think I'm going to give it a 3-star. And for me, 3-star is not a great rating. I think if this were just a standalone book by any other author, if I was being completely honest, I probably would have rated it lower. When I think about it, do I hate it? I don't hate it. I just don't love it. And I just love the other two so much that, I don't know. I'm going to stop talking about it now because I'm just going to get sad. All right, the next book that I read was a DNF. I DNF'd this at 57%. And that was How to Make a Horror Movie and Survive by Craig DeLuey. So I've been seeing this book all over the place. I read a Craig DeLuey book. I read episode 13 last month and I really, really enjoyed it. And I ended up listening to this and DNFing it, like I said, at 57%. Maybe I shouldn't have talked about 2 bummers of a book in a row. So this is about a movie director who works in the horror genre, and he is like the director of a series of movies that are kind of along the lines of, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th. It's in the 80s. He's had a lot of commercial success, but he wants to make something else. He wants to make something more meaningful, and the studios just want him to continue to make what will bring in money. He ends up acquiring an old camera of an old Hollywood film person, and this camera seems to have a history and a story behind it. It is the camera that was used in some major films that were very successful. So this camera means a lot to him. One day he thinks he hears this camera talking to him, and it seems that it can capture some pretty truly horrifying things. Look, the camera's cursed, okay? The camera is cursed. And at this point, I'm like, yes, this book is, we get like a pretty gruesome scene that makes me all into this book. I'm really enjoying it. And then nothing happens. Like, seriously, nothing happens. This is so much more about the how to make a horror movie than it is about anything else. And it's all of the really boring behind the scenes Hollywood shit that I just do not care about. I am not a Hollywood person. I think yes, I enjoy movies, but the whole politics of everything, it's just gross to me. I don't really like to hear about it. I think it's disgusting. It's not my thing. It's against everything that art should be. And I'm sure that is the point of what the author is trying to get across. But it is just so dry and boring that I had to think about my goals for the year, and I just DNF'd it. I am sure at some point it picks up and things get better, but it was just so long without anything going on that all I kept thinking about was, why would you read this when you could read Curse of the Reaper by Brian McCauley, which I feel like has a lot of the same vibes, but is just done so much better. If you end up trying this one and liking it or not really having it be your thing, I highly recommend Curse of the Reaper by Brian McCauley. It is my opinion that you should just skip this one and do that one. Then I read a book that was part of Crystal at Fiber Artsy and Kelly from Kelly Hooked on Books, their book club that they have on Discord. And the book for the month was Out by Natsu Carino. And this is a book that I've had on my shelf for a long time, so I was excited to get to it. So I went into this kind of having a different idea of what it would be than what it actually was. So on the back, it tells you that a woman who works the night shift at like a lunch making factory with a bunch of other women, she is not being treated the greatest by her husband and ends up one day. No, she ends up in him. Let me make that clear. So she has a body that she needs to get rid of, and her coworkers kind of band together and help her get rid of this body. Now, what I thought this was going to be was like a super like good for her group of women who are like helping women all over the place kind of get rid of bodies left and right. I don't know why. Not sure why I thought that, but I did. It is very much not that. While they did work together, it is more like a look at the underbelly of Japan and like this dark side of life, basically involving women that get in like a very desperate situation, and it just kind of snowballs from there. And different players within this world of theirs that somehow all end up coming together and getting involved in the situation somehow, even though they had nothing to do with it to begin with, and just like how all their lives intertwine. I think it was a pretty hard look at relationships, how women are treated, poverty, gambling addiction, just a lot of the dark things that happen behind closed doors, I suppose. And I will say that this was a slow burn of a story, and it ends up in a place that I did not think it would end up at all. It was a little bit bizarre, and it was fun to read overall. It is a lot longer than I think it needs to be, even though it comes in at just like 400 pages, but the very small writing. So I think that if this were any other book that I had, I think it would easily be around 600 pages or more. So it is kind of long, and I do think it was a little bit dry to begin with, but then we kind of get into some gory parts and we see this dark side of life. There is a lot of talk about money in this book, and it was very nice to note at the beginning here how that would convert into US dollars. I suppose at the time that this was published, I think this was a book from the 90s. Yeah, this was written in the late 90s. So it was very helpful to have that conversion from yen to US dollars, just to kind of give an idea of what's going on, because there is a lot of talk about money and what people are willing to do for said amount of money. I had a pretty good time. I think I would give this 3.5 stars. And then last but not least, I ended up DNFing How to Make a Horror Movie and Survive, and then going straight into this audiobook, which makes zero sense for the reasons I complained, because I ended up listening to Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle. I had read Camp Damascus earlier in the month as my first Chuck Tingle book, and I really enjoyed it. And I could not hold off any longer. I had to get to this one. So for someone that just complained about how much they dislike Hollywood and all of that stuff, this is about about a jaded scriptwriter working in Hollywood, and he has a TV series that he writes for, and he's got 2 gay female characters and an upcoming season finale, and he wants to go in one direction, and he is being told that he needs to kill off these characters for ratings, for the algorithm. And this is about our character Misha, who is really struggling with that and wanting to have a different narrative for gay characters in general. And not only that, but he has, like, obviously this love for his characters that he's created, and he doesn't want to see, this is not what he envisions for them. So he starts getting haunted by his past, quite literally. Some unexplainable things start happening to him. I don't want to say because it's not in the synopsis, but literally being haunted by his own ghosts. And throw in there some dashes of going back into his past and seeing like some of the like key moments in his childhood and adolescence that kind of has put him where he is today. I freaking loved this book. I don't know how, I mean, this is how you do the Hollywood story correctly, in my opinion. It really addresses a lot of the issues. I mean, just some of the issues that is wrong with Hollywood and movie making and art direction and all of that stuff today, and how much AI and computers and how AI is destroying art and storytelling and all of the things. Like, what happens when we focus on only money and what sells and what pleases the algorithm of likes and everything else, instead of actually following your heart? We end up with just the same version of everything in slightly different form, and we never truly get a unique new story being told. We're just being spoon-fed the same crap over and over. And I think that this story just tells that story in such a great way. I felt like it was a very unique idea. I was actually truly creeped out at moments and thinking like how are you going to get out of this? Like, how do you deal with this? And just truly being creeped out by several scenes. And I feel like that is hard to do for me at this point of reading so much stuff. But I really was invested. I was creeped out. I really loved the relationship he had with his friend and his boyfriend. I just loved everything about this story. I am pretty sure that this will be on my top 10. I loved it that much. I'm going to give it 5 stars. It was my favorite read of the month. And that is funny, since I read 2 Chuck Tingle books. I did still really like Camp Damascus, but this one I loved even more. And though I listened to it, I ended up buying a physical copy. I could see myself rereading this. Sadly, there was also a Chuck Tingle author event just last week here nearby me, and I could not go because I could not get out of work, but I would have really loved to see him. He apparently puts on quite a show. So if you get a chance to go to an author event with Chuck Tingle, I would 100% recommend it. I have seen videos online and things. He just seems like such a fun guy and just trying to spread love and just this real persona that he is able to write behind that I just really enjoy. You'll have to let me know if you've read any of the books I talked about today, and if you agreed or disagreed. I like to hear both sides of, I like to hear other opinions. If you ended up reading the Craig DeLuey book that I talked about that I DNF'd and you finished it, if you think that it gets better and that I should go back and finish it, let me know. But that is all I have for today. I'm excited to start clean and start a new reading month for August. Let me know down below what your favorite read of the month was for July. And thank you guys so much for watching, and stay spooky.